So I knew Jeremy, Brian, and Justin through the summer when I went to Indianapolis. Yeah, I did this fellowship at their studio. So Justin is the design lead for user experience design. Yeah, right here. And Brian is. Are you the designing for the branding part?
Yeah, mostly visual design.
The visual design, yeah. And Jeremy is a mix of, I guess, illustration, branding, and web user experience design. Yeah. So they have their own special skills and everything. Yeah, and I guess following up, I would just give this whole the time for you guys to present, through the presentation, and if anyone have questions, we'll follow up, during the presentation or afterwards.
Cool, sounds great.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to switch over screens so you should be able to see our presentation,
Yes.
and we'll kick it off. Sound good?
Great.
Can you see the presentation up?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's kick it off. All right. Lisa Carla told you a little bit about the work she did with us over the summer. So I'll give you just a real brief introduction. So Studio Science is a design firm here in Indy. We work mostly with B2B tech companies. So B2B, meaning business to business. So these are businesses that sell mainly software and technology solutions to other businesses. So a couple of examples of those. Here's some of the people that we work with. ReturnPath, for example, is kind of an ideal example of one of our clients where they provide email solutions that they would sell to all different kinds of companies, consumer brands, for example. So they would sell email solutions to Nike or Apple or whatever. I don't think those are actually their clients, but they would provide the tools that actually change the way companies work and do business. So those are the kinds of brands that we enjoy doing work for. And in a minute here, we'll actually give you a little insight into one of our more recent client projects, so you can see some of the work that we've been doing and just get an insight into our process and how we do work. Before that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian. He's going to talk through just some of the principles and values that we like to keep in mind as we go throughout our process, and how they apply to us at Studio Science.
Have you guys heard about any of those names before?
Yeah.
Yeah, like for example, Angie's List, Groupon, yeah. Great.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of I mentioned we specialize in B2B. There's a little bit of B2C, business to consumer in there as well. So Groupon, for example, has both sides too. They have a B2C side where consumers are buying coupons and Groupons.
Uh-huh.
But they also have a pretty heavy B2B side where they're actually selling and reaching out to businesses. There's a blurred line sometimes, but that's kind of our sweet spot. I'll hand it over to Brian now.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. And you all can hear our voices pretty clearly over there?
Yes.
Cool, perfect. Like Justin said, my name is Brian White. I am a senior designer here. I've been working at Studio Science for about 3 years. I just want to share a few lessons that I've learned from since I've graduated from college back in 2005, but particularly since I started working here at Studio Science. So at Studio Science, we're always kind of looking for ways to improve the work that we do, and we're not really afraid to try something new in the name of making our lives a little bit better. So that's kind of from the apps that we use for administrative tasks, like Harvest and Asana are a few that we use, to also some software like InVision that enables us to present our work in a way that's kind of a step closer to what the final product will look and feel like for our clients. And you're going to get a glimpse of InVision here in a little bit. It's a pretty cool product. So, but beyond productivity apps, we're always kind of looking at how we can continue to grow as designers and developers. So today I just want to share with you kind of 3 practices or principles that we employ to improve our ability to create compelling work, right? So as I'm talking through these, I just encourage you to reference them. Next time you're kind of going through a big project that you're working on, just kind of see how you can use these simple little tricks to create better work and to be able to better sell the work that you've been working on and to whatever stakeholders you might have in front of you. So the first one that I want to talk about is iteration. And what I mean by that is just to be kind of prolific in the work that you do. So whether it's a single project that you're working on or whether it's your body of work as a whole, if you can create as many options as possible, it's definitely going to help you out in a few ways, right? So oftentimes, this is where some of you might start with pencil and paper and do sketching. Some of you, it might be more comfortable to jump into Adobe Illustrator or InDesign, whatever you're working in, and just kind of get rolling. But what we like to focus on with iteration is just kind of getting as many ideas out as we can. And a couple ways that it helps is that you kind of get the bad or unexpected ideas out quickly, so you can move past them and find the better ones or the ones kind of are a little less outside of what's expected. And another way is it helps you to gain additional kind of insights. So we like to work with our peers and do as much work as we can and show it to others on the team. Let them interact with it. If it's a logo, just kind of get feedback. If it's a web page, let them kind of interact with it and make sure that there are no kind of gaps in that user experience. And if there are gaps, we can kind of note them and kind of reiterate to make the piece a little bit better for the second round. Second thing I want to talk about is communication. And what I mean there is just kind of talking about how every element in the design work that you're working on points towards your kind of singular client goal or the project's goal. A few ways that this kind of is relative, right? Is that design isn't self-expression, right? It's not like painting or basket weaving. It's working with real clients with real goals, and they're definitely trying to meet those goals, and our work definitely needs to live up to those expectations. So thinking of everything from content to layout and every design element that we put into the work that we do, it should all kind of point to that singular purpose. So anything that's extraneous or decorative, I would encourage you just to kind of take a second look at it and kind of think about how relevant it is to the design. And if it doesn't fit, then I would suggest kind of getting rid of it and replacing it with something that definitely points more towards your client's goals. The third thing that I want to touch on real quick is just presentation too. So when I'm talking about presentation, it's one thing to do the design work. I think it's a different thing to be able to present that work in a way that's exciting and that uses the insight that only you as the designer kind of has. So all the research and the iteration and the time and meetings that you put into your work will kind of fall flat if you don't nail presenting that work to the client. So a big part of being a designer is being a salesperson, right? So you're selling a product, and you should definitely be ready to kind of talk about all of that product's benefits and how the work that you're doing meets your client's goals. There's a design studio out in San Francisco by the name of Mule Design, M-U-L-E. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. Kind of the lead creative person on that team, the owner of it, right? His name's Mike Montero. He gives a really good talk on, I think it's titled 13 Ways Designers Screw Up Client Presentations. I'd encourage you all to look it up, Google it. There's a Medium post, but there's also a video kind of talk that he walks through some really good points about how designers can work to be better salespeople. So I would encourage you to check that out. So that's kind of some of the thinking that we do at Studio Science that I think elevates our work to a better place. And with that, I'm going to let Justin kind of take over and give you a little bit of an introduction to the client work that we do with Cluster Truck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey guys, it's me again. Yeah, we're going to take a look at the client project here. So this project, the client name is Cluster Truck. So this one's a little bit different for us because it's very consumer focused. So I mentioned earlier we're mainly B2B. This is very B2C, but it makes it kind of fun. It's a good contrast to the work we're usually doing. And our expertise still carries over there. Still hitting on 3 of our core areas: brand strategy, identity, and UX. So a lot of these processes and deliverables will look pretty familiar to you all, I'm sure. I'm sure you've learned about these kinds of things in your classes. So hopefully this will just give you a little bit of insight into our process and how we do things. And we will have a time at the end for questions as well. First, a little background. So Cluster Truck, what it is, first of all. Cluster Truck, it's all about food delivery. So rather than all the other solutions out there that are Order Up and Grub all food delivery solutions where you can pull up an app on your phone and get a burger from a local burger joint delivered to you. Cluster Truck is using just a smarter technology to better coordinate everything from the kitchen system to the app where you're ordering food to the drivers to make it so that the drivers are picking up the food as soon as it's ready and getting it to you as soon as possible. In contrast with an Order Up or Grubhub, where you place your order on one of those, the restaurant gets it and they make your burger just like everyone else's that's at the restaurant. But it could be sitting in the window for half an hour before the driver gets there to pick it up because they're gonna have to wait in line like everybody else. And grab the burger, and then they I think have other stops on the way to you. So it's by the time it gets there, you've got this soggy burger. So Cluster Truck's trying to provide a better food experience through that well-coordinated technology. So as with any good design projects and process, we start with research. With Cluster Truck, as it does with most of our projects, it takes kind of three phases of that. So the stakeholder interviews, customer interviews, and competitor research. Stakeholder interviews, when we say stakeholders, we mean anyone who has a stake or kind of like an insider perspective on this business. So anybody within the company, as well as anyone associated with the company. So for example, we didn't just talk to Cluster Truck, we also talked to their restaurant partners and the food trucks that'll be partnering with them. This is a food truck theme. We got as much insight we could into the food truck culture, as much as we could into the business objectives of Cluster Truck. We just clarified any technical constraints. So we found out we're using certain APIs. We're using Uber for the delivery. We're using certain technologies for the kitchen. Anything that's going to have any chance of affecting the way we design and think through the user experience. Second, we talk to customers. So in this case, there are no existing customers since it's a brand new solution. So we talk to desired customers. So we came up with a persona of who Cluster Truck wants to and needs to appeal to. And we talk to those people. So we talked about their experience with similar apps in this case, since there's no existing app. So we looked up, other food delivery apps, since there is a good selection of out there already, and just got to know a little more of their pain points with current apps, see where we can improve, but ultimately get down to know what they really value and what they want from a solution like this, to see where those apps aren't meeting their needs and where Cluster Truck can meet their needs. And finally, competitive research. So we talked about this a little bit, but looking at other competing apps to see what they're doing well, that we can kind of learn from, and also see where they're falling short, where they're not really meeting people's needs, and how we can improve. With that initial foundational research complete, we turned that into a deliverable called the brand spring that Jeremy's going to talk a little bit about. That'll lead nicely into the identity process.
Nice. So, here at Studio Science, we begin our identity process like we do what most other processes with research. And we have this thing called a brand spring, which is a fancy name for a document our content team and design leads put together for our clients at the beginning of engagements. It's basically the culmination of all the information that Justin previously discussed. So the brand spring serves as the foundation that informs and affects almost every aspect of the project. Throughout this process, the design team will also look for opportunities in color and style and review existing brand material. We'll also do some research on the competition and what they're doing from a visual standpoint. Throughout the research phase for Cluster Truck, we decided we wanted the brand to evoke a revolutionary feel and almost have an irreverent attitude towards the food delivery industry as a whole. After the research phase, we start getting into concepting. We start this by putting together a design agreement for the client, which details the stylistic direction and the feels that we think the brand should take. Once an agreement is made, we head into the sketching portion of the project, which I actually have a file here. So after the research phase, we start getting into concepting. We start this by putting together an agreement for the client which details the stylistic direction, and I am repeating myself. But sorry. So here you can see some examples of sketches we did for Cluster Truck. You might notice that there is a mixture of vector and pencil sketches in here. Like Brian was saying earlier, sketching doesn't really mean sticking to pencil and paper. The idea is to get out as many ideas as possible, as quickly as possible, no matter how horrifyingly bad they are. So, here, just one of our artboards. Yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of different directions and stuff that we've explored through here. Some of them are just really, really, really terrible, but gotta get them out somehow. So, flipping over to here. So at the end, we go through and select 3 to 5 of the most successful logos and vectorize them if they aren't already, and prepare them to be presented to the client. We usually use a format very similar to this one, and find that showing the logo in context really helps the client wrap their brains around the logos, and how they could be used. So the goal of this round is to land on 1 to 2 directions that we can push in the following rounds. So here's just, here's just a few pages of logos that we presented in the first round.
Slower. Go slower.
All right, go back to the beginning.
So it's mostly by putting up the logo into context and see how that will look, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then after presenting the concept round of logos and receiving feedback, we move on to reiterating and refining the selected logos. The feedback we received was to try and marry the revolutionary fist concept with the monster idea and try to work in like a mascot of some sort and keep it in like a badge container. So in this round, we really focus on refining the mark, exploring typography, and honing in on color, which I'll go through this one a little slower. So here is the second round that we presented to them, and you can see how we tried marrying the two concepts we discussed earlier in a variety of styles. So we looked at using the monster fist and putting it into a badge in two different styles. And we also went ahead and developed some like monster mascots that could be used for the brand. But as you will all no doubt experience many times throughout your career, there was a shift in direction. So we decided to scrap the first monster and mascot idea in pursuit of something a little different. So we went back to a previous concept of a flying truck that you saw in the first file to represent speed and delivery, but tried to maintain the irreverent and revolutionary vibe. So in this final phase, we focus on finalizing the mark and the type and color for the UI and UX team to begin using in their design. When a final mark is settled on, we go into the file and clean it up by merging shapes and removing any extra and unnecessary points. So here's an example to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. The top, there's just way too many points when it should just be 4 little points to make up a circle. If you don't remove your extra points in a vector file and send it to a plotter, there's going to be a lot of issues in the printing process. We'll also purchase the typeface if needed and outline it and then settle in on final colors. Oops. Uh-oh. Nope. So yeah, the files we provide to the client at the end of our identity projects are horizontal and vertical versions as an AI and EPS and PNGs. We like to include PMS and CMYK, RGB, and black and white formats. So that pretty much sums up our identity process, which brings us to UI, which Justin will be speaking about.
Yeah, so it's not quite a what we call a waterfall process where we move from one to the next, so we wait until identity is finished to go through UX. We try to overlap and work in parallel as much as we can. So Jeremy mentioned, we obviously want to base the look and feel of the UI off of the final identity, the colors, look and feel. But there's a lot of work we can do ahead of that for the UX that really we can start as soon as the brand strategy is presented. So with that, Brian talked about iteration, so we don't want to jump right into coming up with visual designs for the app. We want to start as low fidelity as possible. And the way we do that is is by starting with a collaborative session with the client. So we get in a room with the client. We'll start to throw some ideas up on the whiteboard. You can see an example here. This is an actual shot of our whiteboard. We had the CTO bus the truck over. We just talk through and that, hey, as soon as the user opens up the app, what are the things that need to happen, from start to finish, from when they open it up to when they actually receive their food. We mapped out, you can see really roughly the screens on the right there. Just made sure we had all the big stuff accounted for. And getting this up on the board, even though it's not pretty, it helps make sure we're on the same page with the client, helps start to identify any gaps in the experience, and clarify any misunderstandings as soon as possible in the process. Once we have that base level understanding, we can start to move into wireframes. So still, not moving into full color visual design, still keeping it pretty low fidelity. We're just looking here to establish like the structure and the main click path for the user. So we make sure all the screens are accounted for, start to get the content in there. Just because this is a lot faster and cheaper to iterate with than a full visual design. When we inevitably receive feedback from the client and identify gaps in the experience, it's a lot easier to make those updates at this stage than it is in visual design and down the road into development. So there's a lot of different ways you can do wireframes. We have been using a program called Sketch, which we use for all our UI design. A lot of people still use Photoshop for UI design, which is totally fine, but we've switched entirely over to a program called Sketch that we think does UI design a little better.
Yeah, we are using that for our class too. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great. And then we'll actually take those right from Sketch into an app called Envision that I think Brian mentioned earlier, that we've been using pretty heavily lately for prototyping, that you'll get to see here in just a minute. We'll go through a couple rounds of this, be with the client, walk through it with them, and then gather feedback and revise as necessary. Once we're in a good place there, we'll move on to visual design. So you can see the structure of this has stayed very much the same as on the final wireframe there. You're still, the hierarchy is still the same. It's just emphasized a little bit by the color, the imagery. So we're starting to explore type, a little bit of texture where appropriate. And this is actually the phase where once the identity is complete, we can start to draw on that for some of that look and feel, some of the color. So we tried to, again, Brian talked about communication, so everything pointing back to accomplish that main goal of communicating the brand through the app. So in this case, we wanted to convey that kind of edgy, revolutionary feel. So we avoided, the soft round corners and, pastel-y, friendly colors that are really popular in UI design right now, and in most cases it makes sense. But we, instead of that, kind of favored these harsh lines and angles where we could, to try to make it as fun and edgy as possible without affecting usability. And just like in the wireframes, we should take these still within Sketch from wireframe to visual design. So it actually gives us a great starting point. When the wireframes in Sketch, we can start to work directly off those. And from there, we'll actually move these visual designs right into Envision to create a clickable prototype that we'll use internally just to get a good sense of the feel of it. I'm actually going to pull that up here right now. So you can see this is Envision right here. Pull this up here. So we can start to get a sense for the app, and it almost starts to feel, just like an app. There's no actual code associated here, but you can scroll and click through the app just like you would, and you can download this on your phone to get a good sense for usability. We actually use this not only for our own purposes and for sharing it with the client, but for user testing as well. So we can actually share this with a couple of the same sample customers that we did during the research process. And have them click through and say, hey, use this and go through like you're ordering, food for a group or for yourself. And we can start to watch them and observe them and do some really quick user testing and gain some insights from that as well. So you can see we've found our food truck we want to order from. Click into find the Italian beef screen that we were looking at earlier. Add this to our new group order. And we can click through this, just like we were actually using the app. So start to give us an idea of, hey, we actually, we need a screen here, or maybe we can improve the process by eliminating a screen here, and just gain any efficiencies there. So as you can see, if I click in the wrong spot, it'll actually tell me like where the hotspots are, which is how this all works. But yeah, that's Envision. So it's a great tool for prototyping. Again, it all comes back to just being able to identify any gaps in the experience, any changes we need to make before it gets into development. Because once it's in development, it's really costly to make those changes. And that brings me to development. So we have a couple of ways that we'll actually handle development. We don't actually do any mobile or back-end development in-house at Studio Science. We work with development partners for it. So with ClusterTruck, as we do with a lot of our clients, we work with their internal design team, their internal dev team to build it out. So we're actually bringing a front-end prototype, so we build it with HTML and CSS and JavaScript here. So it looks and feels like the real thing, but it isn't hooked up into their system yet. So we can deliver this to them really quick. Downside of that approach is that once the developers get their hands on it, it's not quite there's a chance for things to get missed, essentially. The alternative to that is we can actually work in the same repo of code they're going to launch as the app. So the pro there is we get to work really close to it, so there's less of a chance for things to get lost in translation. The con is that since we're working with deep within the backend code, it's just a little slower of a process. But yeah, that kind of sums up our process there. So that's how this idea of ClusterTruck goes from just an idea that's in the head of our client to a full blown brand with a personality and messaging and tone, and a visual identity, a website, an app, and that's how we get to contribute to that. So no, we went through that. A lot of information, kind of a long process that ends up being over the course of several months for us. So feel free. We'd love to hear and answer any questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. I think it's good to see that both Jeremy showed the Illustrator file, which relates to what the design students is actually going to be doing. Yeah, and we are at the wireframing phase right now. And I think for the Envision app that you guys showed, I think it made great sense for how to prototype and how that will look. Yeah. Have you guys heard about Flinto?
Yeah, we actually used Flinto on a previous project for a client called Geophedia.
Yeah, really.
I think had good success with that as well. But we wanted to switch to something where we could actually manage all of our company's projects in one area, which found Envision to be the better solution. But I think Flinto is actually pretty nice.
Yeah, is Envision could run through the phone too, or you can only do the online version, like on the website.
Yeah, so if actually, that same link that we were looking at on the browser, if we look at that same link on the phone, it'll have you save it to your home screen. It'll, you can open it, use it just like you would now.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I've not tried on the phone. I thought it's only gonna be like a web application. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you guys have any questions to Brian, Jeremy, or Justin?
The logo area, like when they're brainstorming, and how long did that take? It was just full of ideas.
Yeah, did you hear that?
How
So
long did it take?
yeah, Lee Chen asked a question about for the logo brainstorming session, how long would it take, for you guys to coming up with so many ideas, together, and how many people are involved?
Yeah, did you say for the mobile brainstorming?
Yes.
Oh, for the logo brainstorming.
Yes, logo.
Okay.
So on ClusterTruck in particular, we were actually trying out a new process. So we brought in maybe 4 different designers to kind of ideate and think of concepts and things like that. But what you saw was just one person's artboard.
Oh,
I'd say pretty much everyone's artboard probably looks similar to that. But
So that's
I
not
think
for-
the entire process takes around maybe about a week or two.
Sounds okay, I can see. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's
One
pretty
person-
impressive. I guess the student was shocked of one person can do
I
that
thought it was
many
like
ideas.
5 different designers.
Yeah,
So
Alicia?
they do the logo process, the identity process, and the experience process at the same time, but they still let the identity yeah.
You mean identity runs first, or like the user experience goes later? Is that what you mean? Or
Yeah, because I heard him say they try to do it sort of at the same time,
yeah,
but the design reflects the identity.
okay.
Right?
Yeah, so Elysia asked that you guys said you were trying to run the identity project with the user experience design at the same time, but then later the user experience part will reflect what the identity says. How does that work? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a little bit of overlap there. So basically, once the brand strategy is done, we'll get started simultaneously on the UX process. So starting with those collaborative and really low fidelity stages, and the identity process. With the idea being the final identity would be approved before we start the high fidelity of the UX process. So we get as far as we can in the low fidelity stages of the UX process, but we don't actually, start getting in any visual design there until the identity is approved.
Okay, so the beginning phase of the low fidelity is only for the functionality, how that works. For the logo part, you probably just place some kind of placeholder going on there, and then later when the identity comes in, and then you can start designing the high fidelity version, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's much more efficient than just waiting on one another to complete that part, huh?
That's right. Yeah, 'cause they're looking to. So I'm trying to remember when we started this. Basically, to have this whole process done within the span of a couple months. So we need to be as efficient as possible wherever we can.
Yeah. How many like people can be involved in this whole project?
Yeah, typically it's contained in one team, which is usually 3 or 4 people. But this one we had an opportunity. I think Jeremy mentioned we tried a new process where we brought in some designers from other teams, and I think we had 2, maybe three teams total of people kind of participating at different stages.
Yeah.
We just got shirts for everybody that participated. I think we ended up there were like 10 or 12 people involved total between everybody that got to pitch in on the identity. So like Brian, for example, while not on the core team, has been doing illustrations and contributing in that way. Our content strategy team pitched in, so our video team's doing a little bit of work now. So yeah, it's been cool.
So for the logos that you are selecting it for showing the client, would you feel sometimes that, oh, I created 50 but I only showed 4 to the client? Is it like a whole total waste or something like that? Or how would you deal with that part as a designer?
I just think that's part of the process getting to the final mark is those information before you get to that point.
Okay, yeah. So in the beginning, that within the studio, you already make a selection of what you think is best, and then hand it to client and let them make another selection out of those, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times too, I heard that almost till the end about choosing one final logo, and the client change the ideas about wanting to go to a completely different direction. How
Yeah.
do you want to do? How are you guys, dealing with that?
Yeah, sure. So that was Brian mentioned the concept of communication. So really, we want to be as upfront as we can with the client. Right from the start. About we're not looking for the logo that you like the most. We're looking for the logo that best accomplishes the goals of the brand, that best speaks to the brand strategy that we've decided on at that first foundation of art. So trying to make it a little more objective and less of their opinion and what they like about it or not, and more about what actually accomplishes the goals that we need to accomplish with the logo. So that said, there still comes up stuff along the process like it did here. In this case, we actually saw there was a food truck in Indianapolis that had a logo with a fist in the air holding a fork that we didn't find until about halfway through the process. Thought that might be a little bit of a conflict. So that threw us for a little bit of a loop and kind of necessitated a change in direction.
Okay, that's why you decided to using the flying
That's
food
what
truck.
I find.
Yeah. Good. Do you guys have any more questions? The rest of you? Anything related to can relate to your current project or anything? Yeah. Questions related to the wireframe phase? No? Okay, I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you so much for this talk.